remember in high school I got my first car, and it was a 1969 Chevelle Malibu with a 3-speed on the tree. It was a boat. The only thing that I thought about as soon as I got the car is I can't wait to get a different car. So I worked really hard. In fact, I quit some of the sports that I played to work more hours so I could afford the car that I wanted to buy. It was a 1979 Camaro, and man, that car was great, but it left me on the side of the road so often. In fact, I remember a time when I was coming home from a game and the car broke down and I had to get a friend to give me a ride. The next day when I pulled up, the tires and the rims were gone off the car. And so I had to work even harder to pay for the rims and the tires and the car. You know, I don't know where that car is now because when I went into the military, I sold it. And I think probably it is somewhere, maybe in a junkyard or something. And there's been a lot of vehicles that I've had in my lifetime that I don't even know where they've gone. You know, when I think about money, I think all the way back to when I first got married. My father-in-law gave me a great piece of advice. He said, as you learn what you need to live, that's your lifestyle. He said, as you figure out how much it takes to live, he said, if you start to live on that, and when you get a raise or you get a promotion, you continue to live at that standard of life, then you will always have margin. You'll always have room in your finances. The bad thing about that advice is I didn't follow it. I still remember it to this day, but I wish I would have. I wish I could go back and start all over with my finances. I wish I would have done a better job of creating margin in the area of finances. Unfortunately, I've lived life maybe to the full when it comes from my lifestyle and what I've chosen to spend. When we first got married, we would drive through neighborhoods. And we would drive through these neighborhoods dreaming. We always called it dreaming, but it was maybe just a little bit of envy as we looked at houses that we knew that we couldn't afford because we didn't have the money. In fact, we drive through those neighborhoods in the car that we were riding in, we were always afraid that people were going to recognize that we didn't belong there because we drove an old car. You know, a lot of times we kind of fall into this trap where we think if we just increase or better our lifestyle, it will help our quality of life. But that's truly not the case because Jesus tells us something completely different. That if we sometimes lower our standard of living and live within our means, that there's a peace. And we have peace when we are not fully spent and we're running on empty with our finances. I love what Jesus says in Matthew 6 because he says, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moths and rust will destroy and where thieves will steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moths and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not steal. He also said this, where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So why does Jesus say that money and finances are so important? In fact, if you look at Jesus' ministry and what he talked about, one of the things that he talked about the most was money and what we do with money. Because the truth is, what we do with our money really reveals a lot of what we think about God. In fact, in 11 out of the 40 parables, Jesus talks about money and how we steward our money. You see, Jesus knew that we would always be in this tension. And if it's money that we are serving, it's going to be very hard for us to focus on Him and what's eternal. You see, Jesus gave us all these things to steward. And as we steward those things, He wants us always to be reminded that He is the giver of all things. So as we trust more in Him and as we experience, we develop more margin in our life. There's 3 things that I know about you. The first is this, that you are living on a percentage of your income. I don't know what that percentage is. In fact, I didn't know what my percentage was until I started looking at it. The second thing is that you said at some point in your life, if I just had a little bit more, I'd be all right. I remember as we got married and just thinking, if I could just make this certain amount of money, we would be all right. Well, the third thing I know is this. You probably said that 5, 10, maybe even 20 years ago. And the amount of money that you're making now is way more than probably you thought you needed a long time ago. Why is that? You see, because we have bought into the lie that this culture tells us, that as we raise our quality of living, as we get the new car, as we buy the new home, as we wear the new clothes and all the things that it takes to have a better quality of life, that's not really true. You see, our quality of life does not really indicate that what we have. In fact, a lot of times you get a new car, but you come home and your wife isn't happy when she hears the garage open because she knows it's going to be another fight about money. In fact, if you go back to the last 10 fights that you probably had with your spouse, 70 to 90% of those fights were over something financial. You see, our finances really, really control who we are and what we do. If our mindset with God is right, we will understand that He is the creator of all things, and He gives us things to steward, to use, but also to be used for His kingdom. When we have margin in our life when it comes to our finances, we worry less. We have the ability to do things for Christ and His kingdom. So I want to show you a chart today. In this chart, you're going to see on one side there is a money side, and this is your income. And this is kind of what your incomes look like. If you go all the way back to your first job, what you made, your income from that point now has gone up. And as you see it go up, if you continued to keep a quality of life that was intact, and maybe it goes up slightly, you see what the space in the middle is breathing room. That's the margin. And when we live in that margin, we experience peace. But unfortunately, this is what most of our charts would look at like. We have this percentage that we live at in our income, and it looks more closer to we are tapped out. We feel like we don't even know how we're going to make it from paycheck to paycheck. We always feel the stress about money. We find ourselves in financial predicaments, and we don't even want to answer the phone because we don't want to hear from the lenders that we owe. And this is no quality of life. This is running on empty. When we have margin, though, God does work. So as a group and as an individual and as couples, this is what I'm going to challenge you to do today. First thing is this. I'm going to challenge you to make a decision. Make a decision that I'm not going to continue to live this way. I'm not going to continue to live my life this way. When you do that, the next thing that you need is you need to figure out what your percentage is, what the percentage that you're living on. The second thing that you need to do is you need to figure out where your money's going. You know, unfortunately, a lot of times we get to the end of the week, the end of 2 weeks, the end of the month, and we look at our finances and we say, where did all of my money go? We don't even know exactly where we've spent our money and what's happened to it. But when you develop a process where you look at a budget and you spend some time calculating where your money's going, you can understand what you need to live on. Me and my wife did that several years ago, and I was surprised at what we were spending on different things. It's going to surprise you. The last thing that you need to do is start a debt retirement program. And that debt retirement program is, if you have any debt in your life, you know that is a huge burden. And as you develop the program and you start paying off things, and as you see that breathing room, that margin start to increase between your finances and between the way that you live, it creates peace. And God wants you to have that peace. He wants you to feel secure. He also wants you to know that He is the creator, He gives, and everything is His. So when we start living our lives a little bit differently, and we develop that margin in our lives, we experience a peace. Luke 16:13 says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." Jesus knew that we would be torn. And if financial burden has become something that weighs so heavy on you, it creates stress in marriage and life. When we have breathing room, though, it creates freedom. Not just freedom to save more and to be more financially secure, financially able to do things for kingdom work, to give and to be able to see God work through the finances that He's entrusted to us. You know, culture tells us that all we have to do is increase our quality of living by our spending, but that is not what margin tells us. Margin tells us we have a higher quality of living sometimes if we will decrease our spending and trust God. Hey, you're going to see this week as your group goes through the study, there are lots of practical applications when it comes to our money. One thing as a church that we've decided to do is we have bought a license to do financial peace. And we are challenging all life groups, everybody. Maybe you've even done financial peace before in the past, but maybe you've gotten off track. We really truly believe that when our finances don't rule us and we can control our finances, we will find peace and we will rest better in Christ. So talk about that with your group as you go through your discussion questions tonight.